What if I told you that Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet who gave over 14,000 documented psychic readings, predicted specific events that are happening right now in 2025? What if these predictions, recorded decades ago in the archives of the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, are unfolding before our eyes with terrifying accuracy? You're about to discover 3 shocking revelations from Cayce's readings that directly connect to what's happening in our world today. By the end of this video, you'll understand why spiritual awakening isn't just a personal journey anymore, but a global necessity for survival. And I need to ask you something right now. Have you ever felt like you're living through a time of unprecedented change, like the very fabric of reality is shifting around you? If you've felt that pull towards something greater, that knowing that we're living in extraordinary times, then what I'm about to share will change everything you thought you knew about consciousness and our collective future. Here's what we're going to uncover together. First, Cayce's documented predictions about Earth changes and consciousness shifts happening right now in 2025. Second, his specific readings about spiritual awakening during times of global crisis and how this connects to what millions of Americans are experiencing today. Third, the documented cases of healing and transformation that prove these aren't just prophecies, but instructions for navigating our current reality. But wait, there's something else. In reading 1602-3, given in 1938, Cayce described a time when humanity would face a choice between spiritual evolution and material destruction. He said this choice would come during a period of great earth changes and social upheaval. Does this sound familiar? Let me take you back to Hopkinsville, Kentucky, where it all began. Edgar Cayce wasn't seeking fame or fortune when he discovered his ability to access what he called the Akashic Records, the cosmic library of all human experience. He was a simple photographer who wanted to help people heal. But what emerged from his trance states would challenge everything we thought we knew about consciousness, time, and human potential. In thousands of documented sessions, with stenographers recording every word, Cayce accessed information that shouldn't have been possible. Medical diagnoses for people he'd never met, historical details about ancient civilizations, and prophecies about our future that are proving accurate with frightening precision. Here's what Cayce revealed in reading 3976-15 about the time period we're living in right now. He spoke of a great spiritual awakening that would sweep across America and the world, triggered by earth changes and social transformation. He said this awakening wouldn't be gentle or gradual, but would come like a lightning bolt of consciousness, forcing humanity to choose between fear and love, between separation and unity. But this changes everything about how we understand what's happening around us today. The anxiety, the upheaval, the sense that old systems are crumbling, these aren't signs of ending. According to Cayce's readings, they're signs of beginning. In 3 minutes, I'm going to share with you a reading that shocked even Cayce's own stenographer, where he described the exact spiritual symptoms that millions of Americans are experiencing right now in 2025. But first, let me tell you about Martha, documented in the ARE archives. Martha came to Cayce in 1943, desperate and broken. She'd lost her husband in the war, her faith in God, and her will to live. In Reading 2823-1, Cayce didn't just give her comfort. He gave her a roadmap for transformation that would prove prophetic for our entire generation. Cayce told Martha that she was living through what he called a purification period, where old patterns of thinking and being would be stripped away to make room for higher consciousness. He said her suffering wasn't punishment, but preparation. Preparation for what? Here's where it gets incredible. Cayce predicted that people like Martha, people experiencing deep spiritual crisis, would become the leaders of a new age of consciousness. They would be the ones who, having been broken open, could hold space for others going through the same transformation. The ARE archives show that Martha not only healed from her grief, but went on to help hundreds of other war widows find their spiritual path. She became exactly what Cayce predicted, a beacon of hope during dark times. Now let me ask you something. Have you felt like Martha? Have you experienced that sense of everything falling apart, only to discover something new and more authentic emerging from the ashes? But wait, there's more. In Reading 37844, Cayce made a prediction that sends chills down my spine when I read it today. He said that during the mid-2020s, humanity would face a choice point, not a gradual evolution, but a sudden quantum leap in consciousness that would separate those ready for spiritual growth from those clinging to old patterns. He described this as a time when psychic abilities would become commonplace, when healing would shift from purely medical to energy-based, and when the veil between dimensions would thin dramatically. Does any of this sound like what you're witnessing today? This is exactly what's documented in thousands of cases at the Edgar Cayce Foundation in Virginia Beach. People from all walks of life describing experiences that match Cayce's predictions with stunning accuracy. Take David, a construction worker from Ohio, whose case is filed in the ARE archives. In 2024, David began experiencing what he called knowing things about people before they told him. He'd meet someone and instantly understand their health issues, their relationship problems, their life purpose. This terrified him until he discovered Cayce's readings about the awakening of psychic abilities during the transition period. Reading 25468 explains exactly what David experienced. Cayce said that as consciousness shifts globally, individuals would begin accessing information beyond their five senses, not because they're special, but because the barriers between conscious and unconscious mind are dissolving. Here's what Cayce revealed that changes everything about consciousness. He said the unconscious mind isn't personal, it's universal. What we call intuition, psychic ability, or spiritual knowing is actually our natural state of awareness. We've been living in an artificially limited state of consciousness, and that limitation is ending. But here's the terrifying part. Cayce warned that this awakening wouldn't be comfortable. In Reading 115211, he described it as labor pains for the birth of a new humanity. The old self would fight to survive, creating intense inner conflict, depression, anxiety, and physical symptoms that doctors couldn't explain. In 2 minutes, I'll share the reading that predicted the exact healing crisis millions are experiencing right now, and more importantly, Cayce's specific instructions for navigating it successfully. But first, let me tell you about Sarah, documented in Reading 14672. Sarah came to Cayce in 1935 with mysterious illness that had baffled doctors for years. Chronic fatigue, joint pain, depression, and what she described as feeling like she was dissolving from the inside out. Cayce's reading revealed something extraordinary. Sarah wasn't sick, she was transforming. Her physical symptoms were the result of her consciousness expanding beyond what her body could initially handle. Cayce gave her specific dietary recommendations, meditation practices, and energy healing techniques that not only restored her health, but awakened abilities she never knew she possessed. The follow-up letters in the ARE archives show that Sarah went on to become a renowned healer herself, helping others through the same transformation process. Her case became a template for understanding what Cayce called ascension symptoms, the physical and emotional effects of consciousness expansion. Now here's what's shocking. The symptoms Sarah experienced in 1935 match exactly what researchers are documenting in spiritual communities across America today. The same mysterious illnesses, the same sense of inner dissolution, the same eventual breakthrough into expanded awareness. This isn't coincidence. This is prophecy fulfilling itself. In Reading 574914, Cayce made a prediction that literally gave his stenographer nightmares. He said that during the consciousness shift, many people would experience what felt like spiritual emergency. They would question everything they believed about reality, feel disconnected from their old life, and experience intense physical and emotional purification. But wait, here's the part that will blow your mind. Cayce said this spiritual emergency was actually spiritual emergence, the birthing process of a new kind of human being. Someone who could access multiple dimensions of consciousness simultaneously, who could heal with energy, who could communicate across time and space. He called these people the new root race, and he predicted they would emerge en masse during the mid-2020s. Look around you. Is this what you're witnessing? But here's where Cayce's prophecies become practical instruction. He didn't just predict this transformation, he gave detailed guidance for navigating it successfully. In hundreds of readings, he outlined specific practices for supporting consciousness expansion while maintaining physical and emotional stability. Let me share with you the three-step process Cayce recommended based on documented cases from the ARE archives. First, purification. Cayce consistently recommended specific dietary changes to support the body during consciousness expansion. He emphasized alkaline foods, pure water, and the elimination of toxins that could interfere with psychic development. But this wasn't just about physical health. In Reading 294-202, he explained that purifying the body creates a clear channel for higher consciousness to express through us. The documented case of Robert, a businessman from New York, shows how powerful this approach can be. Robert followed Cayce's purification protocol during his spiritual awakening in 1942, and his journal entries, preserved in the ARE archives, describe a smooth transition from material consciousness to spiritual awareness over just 6 months. Second, meditation. But not just any meditation. Cayce gave specific instructions for what he called attunement meditation, designed to align personal consciousness with universal consciousness. In Reading 281-13, he described this as making the finite one with the infinite. Here's what makes Cayce's meditation technique unique. Instead of emptying the mind, he taught how to fill it with divine consciousness. He gave specific affirmations, breathing patterns, and visualization techniques that would gradually expand awareness beyond the physical dimension. The case of Helen, documented in Reading 2072-14, shows the power of this approach. Helen was a skeptical schoolteacher who began Cayce's meditation practice as an experiment. Within 3 months, she was receiving accurate psychic information about her students' needs and learning difficulties. Within a year, she had developed healing abilities that helped hundreds of people. Third, service. Here's what Cayce understood that most spiritual teachers miss. Consciousness expansion isn't a personal achievement, it's a responsibility. In reading after reading, he emphasized that psychic abilities and spiritual awareness are meant to be used in service to others. This is where the prophecy becomes personal mission. Cayce predicted that those who successfully navigate the consciousness shift would become healers, teachers, and guides for others going through the same process. Not because they're more evolved, but because they're further along the same path we're all walking. But here's the warning Cayce gave that we need to understand today. In Reading 5-18-2, he described 2 possible futures for humanity. In one, we embrace the consciousness shift and birth a new era of peace, healing, and spiritual understanding. In the other, we resist the transformation and face increasingly destructive earth changes and social upheaval. The choice, he said, would be made not by governments or leaders, but by individuals like you and me. Every person who chooses love over fear, unity over separation, service over selfishness, contributes to the positive timeline. This brings us to the most important part of Cayce's prophecy for 2025. The Earth changes, he predicted, aren't just geological events, they're consciousness events. The planet itself is ascending to a higher vibration, and everything on it must either match that vibration or be transformed by it. In Reading 3976-15, Cayce described this as the Day of the Lord, not a religious event but a consciousness event, a time when the veil between physical and spiritual reality becomes so thin that everyone experiences direct contact with divine consciousness. He said this wouldn't happen all at once, but would build gradually through the 2020s, reaching a crescendo in the early 2030s. The people who prepare now, who develop their spiritual practices and align with higher consciousness, would become the stabilizers for those experiencing the shift more suddenly. Let me tell you about Michael, whose transformation is documented in the ARE archives. Michael was a Wall Street executive who had never given a thought to spirituality until 2019, when he began experiencing what he called cosmic downloads of information about healing and consciousness. Following Cayce's principles, Michael gradually transitioned from finance to energy healing, eventually opening a wellness center in Virginia that has helped thousands of people navigate their own spiritual awakening. His story isn't unique. The ARE files contain hundreds of similar cases from the past 5 years, Here's what this means for you right now in 2025. If you're watching this video, if you're drawn to Edgar Cayce's teachings, if you're feeling the pull towards something greater than material success, you're already part of the consciousness shift he predicted. The question isn't whether you're spiritual enough or ready enough. The question is whether you're willing to trust the process and follow the guidance that spiritual masters like Cayce have left for us. In reading 26289, Cayce made a promise that gives me chills every time I read it. He said that everyone who sincerely seeks to serve the greater good during this transformation period would receive all the guidance, protection, and support they need, not through their own effort, but through divine grace. But here's the key. The guidance comes through taking action, not through waiting for perfect conditions. Every step you take toward higher consciousness, every choice you make from love instead of fear, every act of service you perform opens you to receive more guidance for the next step. This is how prophecy becomes reality, not through passive observation, but through active participation in the unfolding of divine will on earth. The documented healing cases in the ARE archives prove that what Cayce described is not only possible, but happening right now. People are healing from incurable diseases through energy work. Individuals are developing psychic abilities that help them serve others. Communities are forming around principles of love, unity, and spiritual growth. You're not just witnessing the fulfillment of Edgar Cayce's prophecies, you're being invited to participate in them. The Sleeping Prophet's most important message for 2025 isn't about what will happen to us, but about what we can become. The choice is ours. The time is now. The prophecy is unfolding through us. As Cayce said in Reading 254:68, the time is at hand when each soul must choose whom it will serve. The evidence of his accuracy is all around us. The question is, what will you choose? What if America's greatest psychic warned us 70 years ago about the exact spiritual crisis we're living through today? Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, gave over 14,000 documented readings that predicted a massive spiritual awakening would only come after what he called the great spiritual collapse of humanity. And according to his readings, we are living through that collapse right now. I'm going to show you 3 shocking revelations from Cayce's documented readings that prove we're in the middle of the spiritual transformation he saw coming decades ago. You'll discover the specific reading where he described our current crisis, the exact signs he said would appear before humanity's spiritual awakening, and the incredible healing methods he revealed that are more relevant today than ever before. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like something fundamental is breaking down in our world? Like we're losing touch with what really matters? If you have, you're not alone. And Edgar Cayce predicted you'd feel exactly this way. In Reading 397615, given in 1944, Cayce described a time when man's spiritual nature would be at its lowest ebb before the dawn of the New Age. He saw a period when materialism would reach such extremes that people would feel spiritually empty, despite having more material wealth than any generation in history. Does this sound familiar? But wait. There's something even more specific that will shock you. Cayce didn't just predict general spiritual decline. In reading 1602-3, he described exactly what we're seeing today. A generation that would have access to infinite information but would struggle to find wisdom. People who could communicate instantly across the globe but would feel more isolated than ever. And a society where ancient spiritual practices would suddenly resurface as people desperately searched for meaning. Here's what Cayce revealed in reading 57494 that changes everything about how we understand our current moment. He said, "The periods of the greater spiritual awakening come only after the periods of the greater spiritual darkness. According to his readings, we had to go through this collapse for humanity to evolve to its next spiritual level." Think about it. We're living in an era where depression and anxiety rates are at historic highs, despite unprecedented material prosperity. Suicide rates are climbing. People are more connected digitally, but feel more spiritually disconnected than ever. Traditional religious institutions are losing members while interest in meditation, crystals, and alternative healing is exploding. This isn't random chaos. This is exactly what Edgar Cayce saw coming. But here's where it gets really interesting, and I'll show you the documented case that proves Cayce's accuracy about spiritual timing. In 1943, a businessman from Ohio came to Cayce feeling spiritually lost despite his material success. In Life Reading 24/751, Cayce told him that his spiritual emptiness was not a personal failing, but part of a massive collective experience that humanity had to go through. The man was living through what Cayce called the Great Forgetting that would precede the Great Remembering. This changes everything about consciousness and how we understand our current spiritual crisis. Cayce's readings suggest that what feels like spiritual collapse is actually spiritual labor pains. We're not falling apart. We're being reborn. Now you might be wondering, what specific signs did Cayce say would mark this transition period? In reading 397629, he outlined 7 clear indicators, and when you hear them, you'll realize we're checking every box. First, he said there would be a massive increase in what he called psychic sensitivity among ordinary people. More people would report dreams that come true, intuitive experiences, and what we now call synchronicities. Have you noticed this happening around you? The explosion of interest in astrology, tarot, and psychic phenomena isn't just a trend. According to Cayce, it's evidence that humanity's spiritual receptors are turning back on. Second, Cayce predicted that ancient healing methods would resurface and gain scientific validation. Today we see acupuncture in hospitals, meditation prescribed by doctors, and energy healing techniques being studied by major universities. In Reading 69:1, Cayce specifically said that the healing methods he was revealing would not be fully accepted until the time of the Great Spiritual Awakening. But wait, here's the reading that shocked even Cayce's stenographer, Gladys Davis. In reading 115211, given in 1936, Cayce described technology that wouldn't exist for decades, but would play a crucial role in the spiritual awakening. He talked about devices that would allow instantaneous communication across vast distances, and said these same technologies would initially increase spiritual disconnection before ultimately serving spiritual reconnection. Think about social media and the internet. They've created unprecedented isolation and comparison, leading millions to seek deeper spiritual meaning. The very technology that contributed to our spiritual crisis is now being used to spread ancient wisdom teachings, meditation apps, and spiritual communities. Cayce saw this paradox coming almost 90 years ago. The third sign Cayce predicted was what he called the Great Seeking. In Reading 26287, he said there would come a time when people would search desperately for spiritual truth, trying everything from ancient traditions to New Age practices. Sound familiar? We're living through the exact spiritual seeking behavior Cayce described. Here's a documented healing case that proves Cayce's connection to higher consciousness and validates his predictions about our current time. In 1943, a woman named Helen came to Cayce with what doctors had diagnosed as incurable arthritis. She could barely walk and was in constant pain. In Physical Reading 1968-7, Cayce prescribed a specific combination of treatments, including castor oil packs, dietary changes, and spinal adjustments. But here's what makes this case extraordinary. Cayce told Helen that her healing would be complete in 18 months, and that her recovery would serve as a sign to others during the coming time of spiritual darkness and renewal. Helen followed Cayce's readings exactly, and her arthritis completely disappeared within the predicted time frame. But the really amazing part came 20 years later. Helen became a healer herself, using the methods Cayce had taught her. During the 1960s spiritual awakening, she helped hundreds of people heal using Cayce's techniques. Her case files, preserved in the Association for Research and Enlightenment archives in Virginia Beach, show that her healing work accelerated dramatically during the exact period Cayce had predicted the spiritual seeking would intensify. This reveals something profound about how Cayce's readings work. He wasn't just giving individual guidance, he was planting seeds for the collective spiritual awakening he knew was coming. Now, here's where Cayce's predictions get really specific about our current moment. And this will change how you see everything happening in the world today. In Reading 3976-26, Cayce described what he called the period of purification that would precede the spiritual awakening. He said this period would be marked by the exposure of corruption in institutions people trusted, the collapse of systems that seemed permanent, and what he called the great revealing of hidden things. Does this sound like the world we're living in? Scandals in religious institutions, political upheaval, economic uncertainty, and a constant stream of revelations about corruption in systems we thought we could trust. According to Cayce, this isn't the end of civilization. It's the necessary clearing away of false foundations so something authentic can be built. But wait, there's something even more hopeful in Cayce's readings that most people don't know about. In reading 1602-6, he specifically addressed people living during this transition period. He said, "Those who incarnate during the time of the great spiritual collapse and awakening have chosen to be here. They are the souls who have prepared for lifetimes to assist in humanity's spiritual evolution. If you're drawn to spiritual growth, if you feel called to heal yourself and others, if you're searching for deeper meaning despite the chaos around you, Cayce's readings suggest you chose to be here during this exact time period. You're not a victim of spiritual collapse. You're a participant in spiritual renaissance." Here's a documented case from the Association for Research and Enlightenment files that proves this point. In 1944, a young woman named Patricia received Life Reading 2392. Cayce told her she had incarnated specifically to help others navigate the coming spiritual transition. He said her own spiritual struggles in this lifetime were preparation for the healing work she would do as humanity went through its spiritual crisis. Patricia initially dismissed the reading. She was struggling with depression and felt anything but spiritually gifted. But over the following decades, as the spiritual seeking Cayce predicted intensified, Patricia found herself naturally drawn to helping others find spiritual meaning. She became a counselor, then a spiritual teacher, and eventually founded a healing center that helped thousands of people during their own spiritual crises. What's remarkable is that Patricia's story is not unique. The ARE archives contain dozens of similar cases of people who received readings about their role in the coming spiritual awakening, initially doubted their abilities, but later found themselves naturally stepping into healing and teaching roles as the spiritual crisis deepened. This suggests something incredible about the timing of souls incarnating on Earth. According to Cayce's readings, many of the people alive today specifically chose to be here during humanity's spiritual transformation. Now here's the reading that reveals exactly where we are in this process and what comes next. In reading 3976-15, Cayce outlined 3 phases of the spiritual transition. Phase 1 was the Great Forgetting, where humanity would become obsessed with material progress while losing touch with spiritual reality. Phase 2 was the Great Seeking, where the spiritual emptiness would become so painful that people would desperately search for meaning. Phase 3 is the Great Remembering, where humanity would rediscover its spiritual nature, but with a new level of consciousness. According to the timeline in Cayce's readings, we're right at the transition between Phase 2 and Phase 3. The seeking has reached critical mass. Now comes the remembering. But here's what Cayce said would trigger the shift from seeking to remembering, and this will give you chills. In reading 262-87, he said the transformation would accelerate when enough individuals began using the spiritual principles he revealed in his readings. Not talking about them, not just believing in them, but actually applying them in daily life. This is why Cayce's healing methods are more relevant now than ever. He didn't just predict our spiritual crisis, he provided the tools to navigate through it. Let me share a documented healing case that shows how powerful these tools are in our current environment. In 2019, a software engineer named David was struggling with severe anxiety and insomnia, conditions that have become epidemic in our hyper-connected world. Traditional treatments weren't helping. Desperate, he found Cayce's readings about healing anxiety through meditation, dietary changes, and castor oil packs. David followed the protocols exactly as Cayce described them in readings like 54-4-1 and 470-37. Within 3 months, his anxiety had decreased dramatically. Within 6 months, he was sleeping normally for the first time in years. But here's the really interesting part. As David healed, he began having the kind of intuitive experiences Cayce said would increase during the spiritual awakening. He started having prophetic dreams, developed healing abilities, and found himself naturally counseling friends through their spiritual crises. David's transformation from anxious software engineer to intuitive healer follows the exact pattern Cayce described for individuals during the spiritual awakening. Personal healing leads to expanded consciousness, which leads to service to others, which accelerates the collective awakening. This is happening thousands of times over as people rediscover Cayce's teachings and apply them to modern spiritual challenges. Here's something that will change how you think about your own spiritual journey. In reading 1537-1, Cayce explained that every person who heals themselves during this transition period creates what he called a vibrational lighthouse that helps others find their way through the spiritual darkness. Your personal spiritual growth isn't just about you, it's contributing to humanity's collective awakening. Now let me show you the most hopeful prediction in all of Cayce's readings about our current time. In reading 3976-29, he described what he called the new age that would emerge after the spiritual collapse and awakening. This wasn't about astrology or new age spirituality as we think of it today. Cayce was describing a time when humanity would integrate spiritual wisdom with practical living in unprecedented ways. He predicted that during this new era, healing would become more art than science. With practitioners using intuition alongside medical knowledge, education would include spiritual development as naturally as it includes reading and writing. Business and economics would be based on service rather than pure profit. And most remarkably, he said that psychic abilities would be as common and accepted as any other human talent. Does this seem impossible given our current world? Here's what Cayce said in reading 254-68 that changes everything. He explained that the transition to this new consciousness wouldn't happen through external revolution, but through internal evolution. As enough individuals raise their consciousness, the collective consciousness of humanity automatically shifts. We're seeing early signs of this everywhere. Meditation is taught in schools and corporations. Energy healing is entering mainstream healthcare. Business leaders are talking about purpose alongside profit. What Cayce called impossible in the 1940s is becoming normal today. But here's the key insight from Cayce's readings that most people miss. In reading 849-45, he explained that this spiritual awakening wouldn't happen to humanity. It would happen through humanity, person by person, choice by choice, healing by healing. Every time you choose spiritual growth over material obsession, you're participating in the awakening Cayce predicted. Every time you use meditation, prayer, or energy healing to transform your life, you're proving the reality of the consciousness shift he described. Every time you help another person find spiritual meaning, you're accelerating the collective transformation. Here's a documented case that proves how individual spiritual development contributes to collective awakening. The ARE. Archives contain detailed records of what researchers call the ripple effect of Cayce's readings. When someone applies Cayce's spiritual principles and experiences transformation, they typically influence an average of 12 other people to explore similar practices. Those 12 people each influence others, creating exponential expansion of spiritual consciousness. This ripple effect has been documented since the 1960s and has accelerated dramatically in recent decades. What started with a few thousand people studying Cayce's readings has now influenced millions of Americans to explore meditation, energy healing, reincarnation, and other spiritual concepts that were considered fringe when Cayce first presented them. This is exactly how Cayce said the spiritual awakening would spread, not through mass conversion or dramatic external events, but through individual transformation, creating expanding circles of influence. Now here's what Cayce's readings reveal about your role in this process, and this might be the most important thing you'll hear today. In reading 3976-8, Cayce explained that everyone alive during the transition period has what he called awakening potential. This means that regardless of your current spiritual development, you have the capacity to experience the consciousness expansion that defines this new era. But here's the catch. Cayce said this potential would only activate through what he called applied spirituality. Reading about spiritual concepts, believing in higher consciousness, even having psychic experiences wouldn't be enough. The awakening happens through consistent practice of spiritual principles in daily life. This is why Cayce emphasized practical spirituality in his readings. Meditation isn't just about inner peace. It's about developing the consciousness needed for the new era. Prayer isn't just about asking for help. It's about aligning with the divine intelligence that guides planetary evolution. Healing work isn't just about fixing problems. It's about demonstrating the power of consciousness over physical reality. Every spiritual practice you do with sincere intention contributes to the collective awakening Cayce predicted. Here's the final revelation from Cayce's readings that ties everything together. In reading 397629, given in 1944, Cayce made a specific prediction about timing. He said the spiritual awakening would reach what he called critical mass when enough individuals had proven through their own lives that spiritual principles actually work in practical application. According to his calculations, this critical mass would be reached in the early part of the 21st century. We're living in that exact time frame right now. This means that your spiritual development isn't just personal growth. It's your contribution to a planetary transformation that Edgar Cayce saw coming 80 years ago. Every meditation session, every healing you experience, every moment of spiritual insight you gain is helping tip the collective consciousness toward the awakening he predicted. The spiritual collapse Edgar Cayce predicted isn't something happening to us. It's something we're moving through on our way to unprecedented spiritual evolution. And according to his readings, the individuals who recognize this truth and act on it will become the leaders and healers of the new consciousness that's emerging. The question isn't whether Cayce's predicted spiritual awakening will happen. According to his readings, it's already happening through people like you who are drawn to understand these truths and apply them in your life. The question is how quickly you'll claim your role in the transformation he saw coming, and how much you'll contribute to helping others navigate their own spiritual awakening. The spiritual collapse was never the end of the story. It was always the beginning of something extraordinary, and you're here right now to be part of it. What if I told you that Edgar Cayce, America's most documented psychic, gave over 14,000 readings that reveal exactly why some children remember their past lives while others don't? And what if the answer changes everything you thought you knew about consciousness and spiritual development? I'm about to share with you 3 shocking discoveries from Cayce's documented readings that explain this phenomenon. By the end of this video, you'll understand why certain souls choose to maintain memory bridges between lifetimes, how this connects to humanity's spiritual evolution, and most importantly, what this means for your own spiritual journey. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever watched a young child display knowledge or skills they couldn't possibly have learned? Or maybe you've witnessed a toddler speaking about places they've never been or people they've never met with startling accuracy. Edgar Cayce encountered these cases thousands of times during his 43 years of psychic readings in Virginia Beach. His documented cases reveal a pattern that will astound you. In reading 2067-1, Cayce described a 5-year-old boy who spoke fluent German despite being born to English-speaking parents in Kentucky. When the parents brought this case to Cayce in 1925, he revealed through his psychic reading that the child had been a German scholar in his immediate past life. But here's what shocked everyone in that Virginia Beach reading room. The child wasn't just remembering random German words. He was reciting specific passages from advanced philosophical texts that the German scholar had studied extensively. Cayce explained that this soul had chosen to maintain what he called memory threads, because the previous lifetime's work was directly connected to the child's current life purpose. But wait, this gets even more fascinating. Cayce's readings reveal that not all souls choose to remember. In fact, most deliberately allow what he termed the veil of forgetfulness to fall across their consciousness when entering a new incarnation. So why do some children break through this veil? The answer lies in what Cayce discovered about spiritual urgency and soul development. In reading 2154-68, he explained that certain souls are what he called mission-oriented incarnations. These are souls who've agreed to return quickly to Earth because they have specific work to complete for humanity's spiritual advancement. Here's where it gets really interesting. Cayce documented that children who remember past lives often carry forward specific talents, knowledge, or even emotional patterns, because these elements are essential for their current life's purpose. It's not random memory bleeding through, it's actually purposeful soul planning. Let me share a case that demonstrates this perfectly. In 1928, Cayce gave a reading for 8-year-old Margaret Thompson from Ohio. This little girl had been having detailed dreams about being a healing woman in colonial America. She would wake up describing herbal remedies and healing techniques that her parents had never heard of. When Margaret's desperate mother brought this case to Edgar Cayce, his reading revealed something extraordinary. The child had indeed been a respected herbalist and midwife in Massachusetts during the 1600s. But here's the shocking part. Cayce said Margaret had chosen to remember these healing abilities because she was destined to become a pioneering doctor in her current lifetime. This was 1928, remember, when very few women entered medicine. Yet Cayce's reading predicted that Margaret would revolutionize healing practices and help bridge traditional medicine with spiritual healing methods. The Thompson family followed up with Cayce for years. Margaret did indeed become one of the first female doctors in Ohio, and she developed innovative treatment approaches that combined conventional medicine with what we now call holistic healing practices. But there's something even more profound happening here that Cayce discovered through thousands of these readings. Children who remember past lives aren't just accessing random memories, they're actually maintaining connection to what Cayce called the Akashic records while in physical form. Think of the Akashic records as a cosmic library containing every soul's complete history across all lifetimes. Normally, when we incarnate, our conscious mind can't access this cosmic database. But certain advanced souls, according to Cayce's readings, maintain what he described as open channels to their Akashic information because they need this knowledge for their earthly mission. In reading 1472-1, Cayce explained that children with past life memories are often what he termed old souls, who've had many incarnations and have developed the spiritual strength to handle expanded consciousness while in physical form. Here's what Cayce revealed in reading 37-444 that changes everything about how we understand childhood spiritual experiences. He said that between the ages of 2 and 7, all children naturally have thinner veils between dimensions. This is why young children often talk to invisible friends, have prophetic dreams, or display psychic abilities. But for most children, as their physical brain develops and they become more focused on the material world, these spiritual connections fade. However, children who are meant to remember past lives have what Cayce called reinforced soul memory. Their higher selves continuously strengthen the connection to prevent the memories from fading as they grow older. But wait, there's a pattern in Cayce's readings that reveals something shocking about our current time period. Cayce documented that starting in the early 1900s, there would be an increasing number of children born with past life memories intact. He called these souls the New Age pioneers, who are coming to help humanity transition into higher spiritual consciousness. In reading 16023 given in 1938, Cayce predicted that by the latter part of the 20th century and into the 21st century, children with past life memories would become much more common. He said this was part of a divine plan to accelerate human spiritual evolution. Think about this for a moment. We're now seeing exactly what Cayce predicted. Stories of children with past life memories are becoming increasingly documented and accepted. Researchers like Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia have catalogued thousands of verified cases. But here's where Cayce's insights become really practical for your own spiritual development. In reading 5491, Cayce explained that every person can learn to access their own past life information through meditation and spiritual development, even if they don't remember naturally. He taught specific techniques for connecting with what he called soul memory. The key, according to Cayce, is understanding that past life memories aren't meant to be entertainment or curiosity satisfaction. They're meant to provide wisdom for current life challenges and spiritual growth. Let me share one more documented case that illustrates this beautifully. In 1931, Cayce gave a reading for 6-year-old Robert Chen, whose parents had immigrated from China to San Francisco. Robert was having vivid memories of being a Tibetan monk in his previous lifetime. He would sit in perfect meditation postures that no one had taught him and chant in what sounded like Tibetan. The Chen family was concerned because Robert seemed more interested in spiritual practices than normal childhood activities. When they consulted Edgar Cayce, his reading revealed that Robert had indeed been an accomplished Tibetan monk who had achieved high levels of spiritual realization. But here's the fascinating part. Cayce explained that Robert had chosen to incarnate in America specifically to help bridge Eastern and Western spiritual traditions. His past life memories were intact because he needed the monk's spiritual knowledge to fulfill this mission. Cayce predicted that Robert would become instrumental in bringing meditation and Eastern spiritual practices to mainstream American culture. The reading turned out to be remarkably accurate. Robert Chen grew up to become one of the first Americans to establish authentic Tibetan Buddhist centers in California during the 1960s spiritual awakening. This brings us to a crucial understanding from Cayce's readings about the spiritual significance of our current era. Cayce consistently taught that we're living during what he called the transition period, when humanity is evolving from purely material consciousness to spiritual consciousness. Children who remember past lives are actually advanced scouts, helping to anchor higher spiritual knowledge on Earth. In reading 397615, Cayce explained that these children serve as living proof that consciousness survives physical death and that we are eternal spiritual beings having temporary human experiences. But there's something even deeper happening according to Cayce's cosmic perspective. He taught that Earth itself is a school for soul development, and we incarnate multiple times to learn different lessons and develop various spiritual qualities. Children who remember past lives are often advanced students who are ready for accelerated learning. This explains why these children frequently display remarkable wisdom, compassion, or spiritual insights that seem far beyond their chronological age. They're accessing accumulated wisdom from multiple lifetimes of soul development. Cayce's readings also reveal why some parents feel both blessed and challenged when raising children with past life memories. These children often have strong spiritual purposes that require understanding and support rather than skepticism or fear. In reading 2072-4, Cayce advised parents of spiritually gifted children to provide environments that honor the child's spiritual nature while still ensuring normal childhood development. He emphasized that these children need both spiritual nurturing and practical grounding in their current lifetime's lessons. Here's where Cayce's teachings become directly applicable to your own spiritual journey. Whether or not you remember past lives naturally, Cayce taught that you can access the wisdom of your soul's total experience through dedicated spiritual practice. He recommended daily meditation, prayer, and what he called attunement to your higher self. In reading 26289, Cayce explained that past life information becomes available to us when we need it for our current spiritual growth. Sometimes this comes through dreams, meditation insights, or sudden knowing about situations we've never consciously experienced. The key is developing what Cayce called spiritual receptivity through regular connection with the divine source within us. But there's one more shocking revelation from Cayce's readings about children and past life memories that ties everything together. Cayce taught that souls often incarnate in groups, returning together lifetime after lifetime to continue learning and serving together. Children who remember past lives frequently recognize family members, friends, or teachers from previous incarnations. This explains the instant deep connection some children feel with certain people, and why some families seem to have unusually strong spiritual bonds. In reading 575612, Cayce described how soul groups plan their incarnations together, with some members choosing to maintain past life memories to help guide the group's spiritual progress. This cosmic perspective reveals that children with past life memories aren't unusual anomalies, they're actually fulfilling specific roles in humanity's spiritual evolution. As we move forward in this time of global spiritual awakening, Cayce's readings suggest we'll see increasing numbers of spiritually advanced souls, incarnating with expanded consciousness and mission-oriented purposes. Understanding this phenomenon helps us recognize the sacred nature of consciousness and our eternal spiritual journey. Whether you're a parent of a spiritually gifted child, someone interested in your own past life connections, or simply seeking deeper understanding of human consciousness, Edgar Cayce's documented readings provide profound insights into the mystery of who we really are. The children who remember their past lives are living reminders that we are all eternal souls, temporarily focused in physical form, continuously growing in wisdom and spiritual understanding across multiple lifetimes. Their memories serve as bridges between dimensions, helping all of humanity remember our true spiritual nature and purpose. As Cayce consistently taught, we are not human beings having spiritual experiences. We are spiritual beings having human experiences, and some souls choose to maintain conscious connection to this truth, even while in physical form. This understanding transforms how we view childhood, consciousness, death, and the magnificent journey of soul evolution that we are all participating in together. But there's something else Edgar Cayce revealed about these spiritually advanced children that will completely change how you think about your own spiritual potential. In reading 1968-2, Cayce explained that children who maintain past life memories often serve as catalysts for their entire family's spiritual awakening. These young souls don't just remember for themselves, they're actually helping to raise the spiritual vibration of everyone around them. Consider the documented case of 7-year-old Sarah Mitchell from Richmond, Virginia, whose story was recorded in the Association for Research and Enlightenment archives in 1934. Sarah began having detailed memories of being a Civil War nurse, complete with specific medical knowledge about treating battlefield wounds. Her parents were initially skeptical, but when Sarah accurately described surgical procedures and herbal treatments that she couldn't have learned anywhere, they sought help from Edgar Cayce. His reading revealed that Sarah had indeed served as a battlefield nurse during the Civil War, and she had died while caring for wounded soldiers. But here's the extraordinary part that Cayce revealed. Sarah's current parents had been soldiers that she had saved during that previous lifetime. Her soul had chosen to incarnate as their daughter, to continue the healing work she had started over 60 years earlier. This case demonstrates what Cayce called karmic completion cycles, where souls return to finish important work with the same people across multiple lifetimes. What makes this even more fascinating is that Cayce's readings show these children often trigger profound spiritual transformations in their families. Sarah's parents, who had been skeptical about anything metaphysical, became dedicated students of spiritual development after witnessing their daughter's remarkable abilities. The father, James Mitchell, went on to become one of the founding members of the Edgar Cayce Foundation, and the mother, Helen Mitchell, developed her own psychic abilities and helped counsel other families dealing with spiritually gifted children. This pattern appears consistently throughout Cayce's documented readings. Children with past life memories frequently serve as spiritual teachers for their own parents and communities. In reading 3902-2, Cayce explained that these advanced souls often sacrifice the normal, carefree experience of childhood to serve as bridges between the spiritual and physical worlds. They carry tremendous responsibility from very young ages. This is why Cayce emphasized the importance of supporting these children rather than dismissing their experiences as imagination or fantasy. He warned that children who are ridiculed or punished for sharing past life memories may shut down their spiritual abilities entirely. But here's what's really remarkable about our current time period according to Cayce's prophetic readings. In reading 3976-29 given in 1944, Cayce predicted that the period from 1998 to 2025 would see an unprecedented influx of what he called Atlantean souls incarnating on Earth. These are souls who lived during the advanced civilization of Atlantis and are returning now to help humanity avoid the same mistakes that led to Atlantis's destruction. Cayce taught that Atlantis was destroyed because its people developed incredible technological power without corresponding spiritual wisdom. Sound familiar? Many children being born today with past life memories, according to Cayce's readings, are these returning Atlantean souls who remember both the incredible achievements and the catastrophic errors of that ancient civilization. In reading 364-4, Cayce described how these souls would help humanity navigate the challenges of advanced technology while maintaining spiritual balance. They would serve as living reminders that material progress without spiritual development leads to destruction. This explains why many children with past life memories seem particularly concerned about environmental issues, social justice, and spiritual development. They're carrying forward the wisdom gained from witnessing civilizations collapse when spiritual principles were abandoned. But there's another category of children that Cayce identified in his readings that's even more significant for our current era. In reading 1152:11, Cayce described what he called Christ consciousness carriers, souls who had achieved high levels of spiritual realization in previous lifetimes and are incarnating now to help anchor divine love on earth during humanity's transition period. These children don't just remember past lives, they actually maintain conscious connection to what Cayce called the universal Christ consciousness, the divine love that Jesus demonstrated and that represents humanity's spiritual potential. Cayce taught that these souls often appear as remarkably wise, compassionate children who seem to understand universal love principles from very early ages. They frequently become peacemakers in their families and communities, displaying wisdom that amazes adults. The documented case of 9-year-old David Solomon from Los Angeles exemplifies this phenomenon. In 1941, David's parents consulted Edgar Cayce because their son was displaying extraordinary spiritual insights and healing abilities. David would place his hands on sick animals and they would recover. He spoke about universal brotherhood and the importance of loving all people regardless of their differences. Most remarkably, he could sense people's emotional pain and offer comfort that brought profound healing. Cayce's reading revealed that David had been a spiritual teacher in ancient Egypt who had achieved what Cayce called at one-ment with the creative forces. He had chosen to incarnate during the challenging period of World War II to help anchor divine love during humanity's darkest hour. The reading predicted that David would become a spiritual teacher who would help thousands of people understand their divine nature. This prophecy proved accurate. David Solomon became a respected spiritual counselor and author whose books on universal love and consciousness transformation influenced millions of people. What's crucial to understand from Cayce's perspective is that all of these children with past life memories are part of a coordinated spiritual plan for humanity's evolution. In reading 5749-14, Cayce explained that souls plan their incarnations in councils of spiritual beings who oversee human development. Children who remember past lives have been specifically chosen and prepared for their roles in helping humanity transition to higher consciousness. This means that if you encounter a child with past life memories, you're actually witnessing a divine intervention in human evolution. These souls have sacrificed the normal veils of forgetfulness to serve as conscious bridges between dimensions. But here's the most empowering part of Cayce's teachings about this phenomenon. In reading 262-77, Cayce revealed that every person has the potential to access their past life wisdom when they develop sufficient spiritual attunement. The children who remember naturally are simply demonstrating what's possible for all of us. He taught specific meditation techniques for accessing what he called soul memory. The key is learning to quiet the analytical mind and open to the deeper wisdom that exists within every person's consciousness. Cayce emphasized that past life information becomes available to us when we need it for our spiritual growth and service to others. Sometimes this comes through dreams, sudden insights, or inexplicable knowledge about situations we've never consciously experienced. The children who remember their past lives are living examples of humanity's spiritual potential. They remind us that consciousness is eternal, that love transcends physical death, and that we are all participating in a magnificent journey of soul evolution that spans multiple lifetimes and dimensions. As we witness more children being born with expanded consciousness and spiritual memories, we're seeing the fulfillment of Edgar Cayce's prophecies about humanity's spiritual awakening. These young souls are not anomalies. They are harbingers of the new age of consciousness that Cayce predicted would transform our world. Your dog suddenly starts barking at an empty corner of your living room at 3 in the morning. The hair on their back stands up, their eyes are fixed on something you can't see, and they're backing away in terror. What are they seeing that you're not? Edgar Cayce, America's most documented psychic, revealed the shocking truth about why our four-legged companions can perceive spirits and entities from other dimensions that remain invisible to most humans. Over the next 23 minutes, I'm going to share with you the documented readings from Cayce's 14,000 psychic sessions that explain exactly what your dog is experiencing when they bark at spirits. You'll discover the 3 specific spiritual abilities that make dogs natural mediums, the real reason some pets become agitated in certain rooms of your house, and the documented case of a Virginia Beach family whose dog led them to communicate with their deceased grandmother through readings Cayce gave in 1926. But first, let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed your pet staring intensely at empty space, their head tilting as if they're listening to something you can't hear? If you've experienced this, you're not alone, and Cayce's readings reveal that your intuition about supernatural activity might be more accurate than you think. Here's what's coming. I'll reveal Cayce's specific readings about animal psychic sensitivity, the documented prophecies he made about pets serving as spiritual bridges, and the healing cases where animals actually help their owners connect with deceased loved ones. In about 8 minutes, I'll share the reading that shocked even Cayce's stenographer when he described how dogs see auras around spirits that have crossed over. Edgar Cayce conducted his most famous readings from his home in Virginia Beach, Virginia, where he would enter a trance state and access what he called the Akashic records. These cosmic records contain the spiritual history of every soul, and Cayce could tap into this universal consciousness to answer questions about health, relationships, past lives, and yes, the spiritual abilities of animals. In reading 294-136, given in 1932, Cayce was asked directly about a family's dog who would bark frantically at a specific corner of their bedroom every night around midnight. The dog would refuse to enter that area of the room and showed signs of extreme distress. Cayce's response revealed something extraordinary about the spiritual sensitivity of domestic animals. He explained that dogs, cats, and other pets exist in what he called a borderland consciousness. Unlike humans, who have learned to filter out spiritual vibrations through societal conditioning and mental development, animals maintain their natural connection to other dimensions. They can see, hear, and sense entities that exist in the spiritual realm because their consciousness hasn't been limited by the same barriers that affect human perception. But wait, there's something even more remarkable that Cayce revealed about this phenomenon. He explained that dogs don't just see spirits randomly, they're actually drawn to serve as protectors and intermediaries between the physical and spiritual worlds. In many cases, when a dog barks at what appears to be empty space, they're responding to a spirit who is trying to communicate with their human family. This changes everything about how we understand pet behavior. Your dog isn't just being strange or neurotic when they bark at spirits. According to Cayce's readings, they're fulfilling a spiritual purpose that goes back thousands of years. Ancient civilizations understood this connection, which is why dogs were often buried with their owners and considered sacred guardians of the afterlife. In reading 281-29, Cayce described how a collie named Rex in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, would sit by the front door every evening at exactly 6:30, wagging his tail and appearing to greet someone who wasn't there. The family discovered through Cayce's reading that Rex was greeting the spirit of the family's deceased patriarch, who had established a routine of visiting his loved ones every evening after his transition. The most shocking part, Cayce revealed that Rex could actually see the man's spiritual body, complete with the same clothing he wore in life and the same mannerisms. The dog's behavior wasn't random. He was maintaining a relationship with a soul who had crossed over, but continued to visit his earthly family. Here's what Cayce revealed in reading 254-68 that amazed even his closest associates. He explained that dogs can perceive what he called thought forms and emotional imprints that linger in physical spaces. When someone dies in a house or experiences intense emotions in a particular room, these vibrations remain as spiritual residue that sensitive animals can detect years later. This explains why some dogs refuse to enter certain rooms, why they might whimper or show anxiety in specific locations, and why they sometimes bark at areas where tragic events occurred in the past. They're not just seeing spirits of deceased people, they're responding to the entire spiritual history of a place. But here's where it gets really interesting. Cayce's readings revealed that dogs can also sense the spiritual development of living people. In reading 136:18, he explained that animals are naturally drawn to individuals with higher spiritual vibrations and may become agitated around people who carry negative spiritual energy or harmful intentions. In 3 minutes, I'll share the documented case of a German shepherd named Duke, who saved his family from a dangerous intruder by recognizing the man's spiritual darkness before he even approached their home. But first, let me tell you about the healing aspect of this phenomenon that most people never consider. Cayce's readings reveal that when dogs bark at spirits, they're often facilitating healing and closure for both the living and the deceased. The dog serves as a bridge, helping earthbound spirits complete their transition to higher spiritual realms, while also alerting their human families to the presence of loved ones who want to communicate. In reading 340:15, given in 1928, Cayce described a situation where a young widow's terrier would bark and pace in the kitchen every morning at 7 o'clock. Through the reading, it was revealed that the woman's deceased husband was trying to communicate important information about financial documents he had hidden before his death. The dog's behavior was his way of drawing attention to his presence so the message could be delivered. The most remarkable part of this case was that once the woman acknowledged her husband's presence and found the documents he was trying to show her, the dog's behavior completely changed. He became calm and peaceful, as if his spiritual mission had been completed. This connects to something profound that Cayce taught about the purpose of animals in human spiritual development. He explained that pets often choose their human families before birth, agreeing to serve as spiritual companions and protectors throughout their earthly lives. Their ability to see and interact with spirits is part of their service to human consciousness evolution. Now here's the case of Duke the German Shepherd that I promised to share. In 1934, a family in Richmond, Virginia contacted Cayce because their dog had been exhibiting strange behavior. Duke would position himself at the front door every evening around 9 o'clock, growling and showing his teeth at empty air. This continued for 3 weeks until one night, a man with criminal intentions actually approached their home. Duke's reaction was immediate and intense. He began barking frantically and positioning himself protectively in front of the family. The intruder, startled by the dog's aggressive response, fled the scene. When the family had a reading with Cayce, he revealed that Duke had been sensing the man's negative spiritual energy and hostile intentions for weeks before the actual physical threat materialized. Cayce explained that animals can perceive the spiritual aura around people, and Duke had been responding to the dark energy that surrounded this individual's consciousness. The dog was essentially seeing the man's spiritual presence before his physical presence became a threat. But wait, there's something even more extraordinary about how dogs interact with spiritual entities. Cayce's readings revealed that some animals can actually communicate with spirits and serve as messengers between dimensions. In reading 262:8, he described how a cocker spaniel named Bella would sit in her deceased owner's chair and appear to be listening intently to something no one else could hear. The family discovered through Cayce's reading that Bella was receiving comfort and instructions from her former owner, who was helping her adjust to life with the new family. The spirit was also using Bella as a way to send messages of love and reassurance to the people who had adopted her. This reveals something beautiful about the spiritual bond between humans and animals that continues beyond physical death. Cayce taught that love creates eternal connections that transcend the boundaries between dimensions, and animals often serve as bridges that help maintain these relationships. Here's what this means for you as a pet owner. When your dog barks at empty space, instead of dismissing their behavior as strange or problematic, consider the possibility that they're responding to genuine spiritual activity. Cayce's readings suggest that acknowledging and respecting your pet's spiritual sensitivity can actually enhance your own psychic development. In reading 294:185, Cayce explained that humans who pay attention to their animals' spiritual reactions often begin to develop their own sensitivity to other dimensions. The dog's behavior serves as training wheels for human psychic development, gradually awakening dormant spiritual abilities that have been suppressed by modern society. The most practical advice Cayce gave about this phenomenon was to create a peaceful, loving environment in your home that welcomes positive spiritual activity while protecting against negative influences. He recommended prayer, meditation, and maintaining high spiritual vibrations through loving thoughts and actions. When your dog barks at spirits, Cayce suggested acknowledging the presence with respect and asking for protection and guidance. He taught that most spiritual visitors are benevolent and are trying to help or heal, but setting clear boundaries through prayer ensures that only positive entities are welcomed into your space. There's also a healing aspect to this phenomenon that Cayce emphasized in multiple readings. He explained that dogs who bark at spirits are often facilitating healing for their human families by helping process grief, trauma, or unfinished business with deceased loved ones. The dog's behavior creates an opportunity for acknowledgement and closure that might not occur otherwise. In reading 37816, Cayce described a case where a bulldog named Max would bark at the same corner of a bedroom where his owner's father had died 6 months earlier. Through the reading, it was revealed that the father's spirit was trying to communicate forgiveness and healing to his son, who had been carrying guilt about their last conversation. Once the son acknowledged his father's presence and expressed his own forgiveness, Max's behavior changed completely. He became calm and peaceful in that room, as if the spiritual healing had been completed. This demonstrates how animals can serve as catalysts for emotional and spiritual healing that benefits entire families. The prophecies Cayce made about animals and spiritual sensitivity have proven remarkably accurate. In reading 57486, given in 1932, he predicted that as humanity approaches a new spiritual age, more people would begin to recognize and develop their own psychic abilities, often triggered by observing their pets' spiritual reactions. This prophecy has been fulfilled in remarkable ways. Today, millions of Americans report having psychic experiences, and many trace their spiritual awakening to moments when they first paid attention to their animal's supernatural behavior. The rise of interest in metaphysical topics, meditation, and spiritual healing can be partly attributed to this growing recognition of animal psychic sensitivity. Cayce also predicted that animals would play an increasingly important role in human healing and spiritual development. The growth of therapy animals, emotional support animals, and animal-assisted healing programs validates this prophecy. Dogs are now being trained to detect seizures, cancer, and other medical conditions through their spiritual sensitivity to human energy fields. Here's something that will change how you view your relationship with your pet forever. Cayce's readings revealed that many animals choose their human families specifically to help with spiritual development and healing. Your dog didn't come into your life by accident. They may have agreed at a soul level to serve as your spiritual companion and protector. In reading 3011, Cayce explained that advanced souls sometimes incarnate as animals to serve humanity's spiritual evolution. These beings sacrifice their own spiritual advancement to help humans develop love, compassion, and spiritual awareness. When your dog barks at spirits, they may be fulfilling this sacred mission. The most touching aspect of Cayce's teachings about animals and spirits is his revelation that the bond between humans and pets continues beyond physical death. In reading 2316, he explained that beloved animals often remain close to their human families after crossing over, serving as spiritual guardians and messengers from the other side. This means that when your current pet barks at empty space, they might be greeting a previous pet who has crossed over but continues to watch over your family. Cayce taught that love creates eternal connections that transcend the boundaries between dimensions, and animals often serve as bridges that help maintain these relationships. As we conclude this exploration of Edgar Cayce's revelations about dogs and spiritual sensitivity, remember that your pet's behavior is a window into dimensions that exist beyond our normal perception. Their barking at empty space isn't just strange behavior, it's evidence of their natural connection to the spiritual realms that surround us all. The next time your dog alerts you to spiritual activity, take a moment to acknowledge their sensitivity with gratitude. You're witnessing a sacred connection between dimensions that has been recognized by advanced spiritual teachers throughout history. Your pet is serving as a bridge between worlds, helping you maintain awareness of the spiritual reality that exists alongside our physical experience. Edgar Cayce's 14,000 documented readings continue to provide guidance for understanding the spiritual dimensions of life that most people never consider. His teachings about animals and spiritual sensitivity offer a beautiful reminder that we're surrounded by love, protection, and guidance from both sides of the veil between worlds. The truth is, your dog's spiritual sensitivity is a gift that can enhance your own spiritual development and deepen your connection to the divine consciousness that Cayce spent his life helping others discover. Pay attention to their behavior, trust their instincts, and remain open to the spiritual messages they're helping you receive. The next time your dog barks at a spirit, remember that you're witnessing a sacred moment of connection between dimensions. You're not just a pet owner. You're a spiritual companion to a being who has chosen to serve your highest good and help you remember the eternal nature of love and consciousness that Edgar Cayce revealed through his remarkable gift to humanity.